Hey, it's Ukallii, welcome back, and today we're going to talk about Chapter 10 of my Harry Potter rewrite fanfiction. So right off the bat, this chapter is the last chapter in Diagon Alley, and the first chapter that starts this Shea Who arc, as I've been thinking of it. This is the most marked change from the original book. Almost everything from this point to getting to Hogwarts is completely new. New material that I've added to the fanfiction. It's not really based on anything in the original novels at all. And that kind of starts off in this chapter with the character of Lady Shizumi. So the first scene in chapter 10 is the introduction of Lady Shizumi. Draco, Harry, and company are all just kind of having dinner, just chilling out. Chit-chatting about meeting Snape and talking about Snape a little bit, and then we get the introduction of Lady Shizumi. That is not a coincidence. I want Lady Shizumi and Snape to be affiliated with each other because there are plans for the two of them in the future. I'm sure you guys have already started to get the feel for that. But let's talk about Lady Shizumi a little bit, because she's a completely invented character. I created Lady Shizumi for 3 reasons. One, for the purpose of expanding the inclusiveness of the series. She is a trans character. Second, to give Snape a counterpart who is just as capable in potions as he is, but isn't interested in being a teacher or anything like that, and has nothing to do with Voldemort. She's just a completely separate character. And 3, to allow for Snape to have a reasonable romantic partner throughout the story in the future, one day, potentially. Now, I've got a lot of ideas about what to do with Lady Shizumi later in the series. I've got some considerations about her for her role in the plot and kind of how people would treat her because of a relationship with Snape, so I don't really know what her future is right now. I've been thinking about a few things, but I haven't decided on anything. What you see here in this section is that she's very poised, she's very elegant, she's very, Harry doesn't even take into consideration she might be trans when he first meet her. She's completely, she passes, as the term is, 100%, but then the Remus and the others kind of point out that she's trans. The reasoning for this is just, it's just part of her backstory, it's just part of her history, and it's just something that is, interesting about her. They're not really gossiping about her, they're just kind of telling her story to him, as another way to introduce some elements of the magical world to him so that he knows this is a thing, this is a part of the magical community. There's always been trans people. Trans people have existed for all of time, and there were trans people in the 19th century, there were trans people all over the world. But I feel like they don't get a lot of attention because they've been kind of written out of history, and also because very often they would be murdered. So I didn't really have a whole lot to go off of with her character. Basically, I just wrote a female character and then included that, she'd started off as a guy, because I feel like magic would be so effective at the transition that you wouldn't even see anything that would hint to a previous upbringing. So, but she does talk about beautification potions. She talks about how they're nothing to be ashamed of, and Remus talks about how James used beautification potions even at school because he wanted to appear as attractive as possible for Lily because he had a huge crush on her. And also that there were other kids at the school that used beautification potions because of, typical teenage stuff like acne. I wish I had some. And that Snape started using them in school when he was young too. This is to kind of begin the transition of him going from this awkward teen who kind of hates everything about himself to starting to develop some confidence in using his appearance to do this. This is to help justify why he looks different than he does in the books, and to help understand why he might have started doing that and how his relationship with James and Lily may have been affected by his change of appearance. For Lily, it didn't really do anything because she'd known him for so long. It's not like he became handsome and then she was like, oh, I don't want anything to do with you, or anything like that. He started using beautification potions in 6th year, so that's after the fight with Snape and Lily. But James endorsed it. James was you know, defensive against people who like tried to tease Snape because of it. So you do have this element of James being kind to Snape when they're still students, when they're still at Hogwarts. I know that there's a lot of people who like make posts and stuff and chit chat on in the fandom about how, you know, James was always cruel to Snape and Snape was always the exception and everything because of what Seers says in the 5th book. But I honestly think James would have backed off from Snape once he and Lily started becoming friends because he would have learned more about Snape through her. So I added this in to kind of start to hint to that James may have had a rough history with Snape in their first 5 years, but after he and Lily got together, that really, really backed off, just because he started to understand Snape a bit better. At the end of this scene, there's a very small alteration that I did from the original version. In the original version, Draco says goodbye because right after this, the next morning, they leave. I actually made a change of that. I had them stick around in Diagon Alley for just a little bit longer to situate Harry with the medical situation and everything, and then they leave. So it's a few days before they leave. So Draco doesn't say, you know, goodbye for always. He's just like kind of messing around, flirting with Harry, and then he runs off, and then they go about their day. But Draco knows that this isn't goodbye for sure. You know, this is just goodbye for now. And then Draco shows up later in Shea Who. So this scene is kind of toned down a little bit from the original version. And Draco's kind of calmed down just a little bit in this scene. Next, there's a short scene where Sean and Marie are back, and Harry's like, "Hey, how was your date?" And they also chit-chat about how magic is working with Harry and the healing process and all of that, and then they continue going on. There's a small change at the end where instead of Remus saying, "Okay, well, hurry up and pack so we can get on the train," he's like, you know, "Take your time, let's get out of here to finish your shopping, and then we'll head off to the manor." So he's calming down because the timeline has been expanded. From there, we head off to the Highlands of Scotland. We go to the Cairngorms. If you guys don't know where the Cairngorms is, it's a real place. I'll put up a map to show you where it is. The exact location that I've picked out for the location of Shehu. There is like a holiday resort there, and that's where I've picked the location at. So it's around that loch that I've picked out. So they're making their way to Shehu, and Harry has another one of these visions that he's been having. Now, you'll notice that it's been a while since he's had a vision. He had a vision right when they arrived in Diagon Alley. He had a few visions at the Dursleys' house, and now he's having this vision here. So it's been about 2 weeks since he's had a full vision. He's had a few like seer moments, kind of intuition seer moments, because his magic's been crazy, but that's calmed down. But what I have in mind is to have one of these visions about once a month-ish, thereabouts. So this one, again, the connection is Harry's feelings about going to the manor, going to Shehu, going to these places that he doesn't have any memories of. He doesn't really know very much about them, and that feeling connects to James's feeling of returning home and feeling like he's a stranger in his own land. And Fleamont is James's dad, kind of teasing him a little bit, just kind of talking about Lily and pointing out that James and Lily have met. Their first meeting has happened. She fell off of a bookcase into his arms on accident, and then shook his hand, and he was like, "What? So much physical affection," and he was really startled by it. So Lily made a definite impression. I would like to actually have that first meeting moment, but I have in mind to have it later in the series, when Harry has a similar emotional response to a girl. After that, Harry finally admits to Remus and Rose about his visions. He finally admits what's going on, and Remus explains the visions. I feel like I did a really good job explaining the magic in this scene, but just to kind of go over it, Harry has inherited the Seer's Eye from Anne Wen, James's mother. She was believed to be a seer, or at least be proficient in divinations, and so that has passed down to him. It's actually talked about in the original series that the Seer's Eye sometimes will skip generations. Fans have argued about this because they don't know if this was just Trelawney's kind of crap to justify her being a seer or not. But she does say that sometimes it skips generations, and I think it makes sense. So sometimes the seer eye will skip generations. It skipped James. He was not a seer, but it came to Harry because of how strong of magic he has, how powerful he is. So Harry has the seer's eye. He is post-cognitive. Now, I did make a distinction in this scene about the different kinds of seers. So you've got those who can see the future, precognitive seers, who also see prophecies. That's what That's what Trelawney is. Then you've got anti-cognitive seers, which is actually what you see in the original books, Harry having anti-cognitive visions of specifically of Voldemort. Anti-cognition is seeing things as they happen. So like whenever Harry had the visions about the Department of Mysteries, he was seeing it as it happened, rather than, you know, seeing it weeks later or weeks beforehand. So that's anti-cognition. I have changed it so rather than Harry having anti-cognition, he has post-cognition, which is the ability to see the past. Now, I think this is really useful to include in this fanfiction because it allows me to write scenes from other people's perspectives and allows me to write scenes of the past rather than having Harry discover the past from other people. I just think it's a useful narrative tool. I like playing around with it. I'd like to possibly incorporate it into my book, so I'm testing the idea in this fan fiction. So Harry has these post-cognitive visions where he's seeing the past, but as Remus explains, it starts off being just seeing the visions of people that you're directly related to. So Harry first just sees people that he directly knows, like his parents, and eventually he'll be able to see other things. So eventually he'll be able to see, for example, Voldemort. So those visions will come later. I have a plan for how these visions will become very, very important to the plot in the later 2 books, but it's a while before we get there. So for now, these visions are just a way for Harry to connect to his family and connect to his heritage. I've also pointed out that each of these gifts includes, like, having the ability to see the future, the present, and the past also includes kind of an affiliated gift. So being able to see the future allows you to also have prophecies. This is what we see with Trelawney. Anti-cognitive seers are also sometimes telepaths, and post-cognitive seers are also sometimes empaths. So we're gonna see some moments of Harry struggling with empathy, not in like a normal way, but in a supernatural way, being forced to feel other people's feelings later on in the series, as that comes up. I like the idea of that sort of happening in book 5, and that's kind of why Harry's all over the place, rather than it being because of Voldemort. It's because of this empathy kicking in. But again, that's a later book. We'll talk about that as we get there. Remus gives a little bit of history about the Potter Manor. He gives a little bit of history about the property and about the house, the actual house that was built. And he explains that Charles Potter was the one who built the manor. If you go to the world Anvil, I've actually built the family tree of the Potter family. In fact, I actually built the family tree of all the Pureblood families, based off of what we learn in the books and based off of the original, official family tree that J.K. Rowling created. It does not have dates, because J.K. Rowling's math is horrible and she got things wrong sometimes. She had like 12-year-olds having kids, and 10-year-olds having kids and stuff. Like, they had kids younger back then, but not that young. So, there's some problems with her math, so I have not fixed the math in those family trees. I just tap them in of who's related to who. But you can check that out if you'd like, and it includes Harry's entire family tree and some information about each of the generations of the family tree, so you can learn more about that if you would like. I'll put a link in the description box below to the World Anvil website, so you can go check that out again if you've forgotten about it, because it's been a year since I've mentioned it. You can check that out too. So they arrive at the gate of Shea Who. This is a Tory gate. And Harry has to use his magic to get through the gate. He doesn't really have to, he could just walk right through, but Remus wants him to reconnect to the blood charms of the property, so he has him connect to the blood charms and connect to that magic, and in doing so the wildlife kind of flourishes because Harry's there. That is a hint, a foreshadowing. Not really foreshadowing, just a hint about the way that Harry's magic works. It's very symbiotic. Ollivander talks about this later. His magic is extremely symbiotic. It really cooperates with the things around him. It's very natural, and there's a reason for that that's going to be explained later in the series. Abraxas Malfoy kind of brings it up a little bit in this book, but it becomes more important later in the series. I have plans for that information, so that is why I'm planting this here. Harry's magic is very natural, and it really cooperates with natural sources like blood charms in the earth around him. So, and that's actually it. That's it for this chapter. It explains itself really well. I don't feel like I have to go into a lot of explanation for it. This chapter did not have a whole lot of changes. Most of the changes were very, very small changes, mostly just to extenuating the timeline of how long they were in Diagon Alley. But the next few chapters went through a lot of changes because I did rearrange things in Shea Who, like when they did things and when they went places and things like that. A lot of scenes got moved in the next few chapters, so there are lots of edits coming up. But this chapter was mostly left alone, so yay. Alright, that's it. Nice short video, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!